Well, good evening to you, and it's so good to have you here again with us for another episode of Advancing the Cause. So, let me first welcome every single one of you. And just to remind you, please call your friend, call your neighbor, call your mother, just about everybody, and let them know Advancing the Cause is on. And like everything else on this program, we share the truth. We talk about the issues that are affecting us in our country. We also talk about issues that are affecting our Caribbean brothers and sisters and even further afield. But we focus mainly on what is happening here in Guyana because we could only fix our problems first before we attempt to fix the problems of others. And so we're going to share with you quite a lot of what is happening. And as our topic is saying, Guyana is in crisis. And if you recognize what is happening every day, something else is happening. Every day, another act of corruption. Every day, another act of discrimination. Every day, someone is being sidelined. And the only persons who are enjoying the good life are the elite few, the three F's: family, friends, and the favorites. And so we're going to share a little more with you. But before we do that, let me say to all those who would have celebrated their birthdays between last Wednesday and today, happy, happy birthday to you. I know just recently we had, I think it's a Mr. Lewis who celebrated 101 years as his 101 birth anniversary or 101st anniversary, if I'm saying it right. And we want to say happy birthday to him. I know we had 50th, we had 25th, we had 40th, we had somebody celebrating their 90th birthday. So happy, happy birthday to all of you. And I trust that God is going to give you the wisdom you need and the tolerance you need so that you can continue to interact with your fellow citizens around here. And you know what? Of course, we have to extend to those who've lost loved ones our heartfelt condolences, and we pray that God is going to comfort you at this time. It's not easy to lose a loved one. And as I'm saying that, I'm remembering our very own comrade, Jevon Stevens, who we lost early this morning. Young man, full of life, 38 years old, full of life. But you know what? Death is one of the factors that is sure, but we don't know the time. And so, to his immediate family and to his extended family, the members of the PNCR group in New Amsterdam, and to all of us in the PNC setting, the PNC family, this big, large family, we extend heartfelt condolences to you. Of course, Jevon is going to be missed because he was full of life. His life was dedicated to serving his country, serving his party, serving the people of this country. He was always there, a big man with a big heart, who was always willing to go to the extreme to ensure that persons were comfortable. I remember Jevon serving there in Region 6 as the regional health officer in Region 6. And so I know that arm of the family, they're also hurting. It was so, so sudden. Just 2 weeks ago, I saw Jevon there, and he was full of life. As a matter of fact, last week I spoke with him because we had an arrangement for the World Teachers' Day activity. And Jevon was there, and he was all up on ensuring that our teachers were comfortable. And this morning, it was a totally different story. So I want to say to us, to all of us, be mindful of how you tread on this earth. And so that when you leave, you're going to be leaving footprints that will have impacted the lives of persons. May his soul rest in peace. While we continue on this, I want to share with you, like I said earlier, Guyana is in crisis. And there's no use hiding behind the sand and trying to deny this. We are in crisis. As a matter of fact, from August 2nd, 2020, Guyana started experiencing crisis. And we've gone deeper now. But you know what? We still have some dedicated persons around who still are very patriotic, and their love for country will not die. And so this evening, I don't want to take up too much of the time that we are going to spend with our guests. Uh, this young man is no stranger to these kinds of forums. As a matter of fact, he is no stranger to Guyana. He served um, in this country in very, very many capacities. As a matter of fact, let me start from the party level. He served as general secretary, and he was in the youth arm, and he was everywhere there in the party. And then when we got government, and I'm not talking about 2015, he served there as Minister of Health. He served as Prime Minister. He served as Minister of Housing and Labor. He served as Minister of National Development. He was also Minister of Youth and Sports. And, with that kind of linkage behind you, you must know what you say when you come to forums like these. As a matter of fact, his last appointment was that of Mayor of Georgetown. As a matter of fact, let me say it was, he served as the longest mayor ever. And it was not because of him wanting to serve as mayor. It was because this very PPP government, this very installed regime, they did not see the need to have local government elections. And so, viewers, let me invite our guest. And it's an honor to have him here with us. It's always an honor to have our elders who can speak to us from that level. And so I'd want to introduce to you, it's a pity I can't say to you, put your hands together, but let me introduce to you our guest, the Honorable Comrade Hamilton Green.
Thank you, Coretta. May I add my words of condolences and sympathy to the passing of that young man this morning. You may not know, but he's the son of a stalwart Guyanese, I think one of our most experienced and skillful of pilots, Larry London.
Mm-hmm.
And I offered my condolences on behalf of my family earlier today, and look forward to the family having the strength to live the next period of their lives with the strength that only can come from the Creator. The theme of your program is interesting, and I'd like to add this caveat. What we're talking about on your program is a step towards education so that particularly our young people will be able to agitate with that education and to liberate. I say liberate because this country is at a crucial period of its history. The problem is, the big challenge is that because the ruling cabal, the elite, have control of the media, massive sums of money, and are using those two elements to persuade, fool many of our people. I hope, therefore, that this program will be used to turn that movement around so that we have the strength to agitate to save this beloved country of ours. It's easy on these programs to make open references. But if you'll allow me, I will make one example of the problems we face. I listened to the two top men in this government, President Ali and Vice President Cde. President Ali recently was very robust in his statements, criticizing something that apparently a previous president had said on certain issues. And during the conversation and in other statements, they like to make comparisons. I can spend the next 10 hours responding to some of those comparisons. But for now, I'll make one example to show the dangerous situation we are in today. Our sister CARICOM state, a real sister state, Trinidad and Tobago, their population from the last count is about 1.5 million people, 1.5 million. Guyana's population, with upgraded figures, it's about 800 to 800 plus people. In other words, Trinidad's population is about 60% more than ours. Yet, in that country, oh, let me add this fact. The oil resources we have today declared, and I use the word declared advisedly because we're not too sure what the true, as the old man said in our boys' tongue, the true facts are. But the declared figures show that we are now harvesting 6 times more oil and gas than Trinidad ever did. Yet, in Trinidad, the young people and their parents don't have to scrounge around to pay the exam fees for CXC. It's free in Trinidad. In Trinidad, I know of many Guyanese who have to journey there to get certain medical facilities and equipment and drugs not available in this country, which they say is the fastest developing economy in the world. And therefore, that one example should tell you of the problems we have with this, what appears to be a corrupt cabal at the helm of the ship of state. I know of families who have been forced to migrate because they couldn't afford how their friends send certain drugs into this country. And let me say something which cannot be disputed. I have written the Minister of Health, pointing out to him that certain drugs are not available in this country and that they ought to be. I don't want to get into complex issues, but a simple thing, Eliquis, which I use, but I've got to get it from overseas. Other people with less family connections overseas, as I said, have migrated to stay in one piece. So the hypocrisy of this government is patent. And I hope that our young people who listen to this program would understand the challenge we face in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I was speaking over the past 48 hours with 2 young people in their mid-20s. And it's surprising. They did not understand our political journey. They did not understand the effect of the Cold War, the magnificence of Burnham when he articulated free education from kindergarten to university. But at that time, he also introduced national service, an institution intended to, as it began to, bring our people together and make this nonsense about one Guyana a reality. But the powers that be are reluctant, if not afraid, to mention any program that Burnham initiated. What is happening today is egregious. We are no longer in control of this country. We have made the hoisting of our golden arrowhead on the morning of the 26th of May, 1966, a mockery. When that arrowhead was hoisted, our two political titans, Jagan and Bonham, embraced to the applause of the entire national ground there. It was because we all felt these two men played their part to gain independence for this country. And I think it's a pity, it's a crime that those who now hold office are reversing the underpinnings of what Jagan stood for. They put up a sign saying Jagan is the father of this nation. And those same elements are allowing our erstwhile imperial masters to control this country and, it appears, tell our current crop of leaders what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And I use this opportunity once again, if you'll allow me, to plead with our current crop of leaders. They need to have the sense, the good sense, if that exists, to discuss this country with the opposition so that we go to all the big ones who are now harvesting our non-renewable natural resources, to bring them to the table, to say this is what we want, this is what we would like to bequeath to our children and their children, so that this country is a blessed country. I don't people realize how blessed we are. No natural disasters, sun, a little bit of rain, we complain. But as you know, if we don't utilize that blessing, if we allow people who don't understand what independence is all about, that blessing, my friend, can be a curse.
Yep.
This is my worry as an elder, that that curse wouldn't descend upon this nation. And if I say nothing more tonight, it's to appeal to those young people, particularly those in the 20s and the 30s, to understand the tremendous challenge we face, to get together irrespective of race, color, creed, or political persuasion. Because what is happening today, as we're allowing the golden arrowhead to be more known than a rag, that we have reintroduced the worst form of imperialist domination. I cited Trinidad a moment ago. I listened with anger to President Ali a few hours ago, announcing that they'll be having this magnificent oil refinery at the mouth of the Berbice River. There's been no study. Yes, an oil refinery does what it should, take a natural resource to its next level. But unless you have all the things in place, you're just doing as they're accustomed to do, talking old shop and deceiving these people of the country. I met a group when I was at Glasgow 3 Sundays ago and reminded them, and it was a mixed gathering, that the PPP ought not to be forgiven by the people in East Berbice. I recall, for example, that when the study was done for the bridging of the Berbice River, that based on the soil conditions, the width of the river, the recommendation was some point on the east between Rotterdam and Stanley Town, and to the west at Ithaca. But for reasons which are not obscure, this government ignored those recommendations. And therefore, we need to remind people that is why the IDB did not fund the bridge. So they turned to the NIS and other institutions to rape, and I use the word guardedly, the NIS, so that today you pay 2,000 plus to cross the Burbis Bridge. And the bridge built by the master blaster Burnham, you only pay $200. And Coretta, let me say something which I found people don't know. The Demerara Harbor Bridge is longer than the Burbis Bridge.
That is true, and quite a lot of folks don't know that.
And people don't know that. And that is why this program should not deal only with the culmination of what is happening, but get people with facts and figures, and perhaps begin some competition among our school children, because they are our future. So they are seized with information that will give them the knowledge, as I said, to agitate, to liberate this country. I pause at this time to invite any other issues that you may wish to raise, except on a very personal note. I have committed the remaining years of my life, and I don't know how many years it is. I know what I would like it to be, but that fellow up there has his own ideas sometimes. To doing what I'm doing now, to share information with our young people, to expose the nonsense taking place, and to show that what we face in Guyana today is not new. I remember the two Josephs. Joseph Goebbels was Hitler's propaganda minister during the reign of Adolf Hitler in Germany. And Joseph McCarthy, the Republican senator, who was ultra-right and pursued anyone who wore anything that looked red in the days of the Cold War. And the underlying belief of those two gentlemen was that if you repeat a lie often enough, the people would soon accept that as gospel truth. And even those who don't believe in the gospels and run with it as the truth. And so this program, I plea, should be to pass information on to our young people. And I stand ready, as I did to the young 25-year-olds I spoke to during the week, to share with them what this country is all about and the great potential we have. If we don't act today, Coretta, what is now a blessing can be a curse. I hope and pray that the people of this country, including PP supporters who ought to by now notice that they're being misled with fancy words and slogans by their purported leaders, and that what is happening is they are using a dagger in the backs of certain people, hoping to create conditions very much against what they talk about in public about this one Guyana. We have a slogan: one people, one nation, one destiny. And I hope that you can host a program where we bring to this studio and elsewhere our young people who are still in school, in universities, to ask questions, to remove the blanket of lack of knowledge that exists. Because I pause with the theme I developed. You need to educate so we have the moral and physical strength to agitate so that we can liberate our beloved country. And on the question you wanted to raise about Venezuela, it's a complex and serious issue. I heard Leader Aubrey Norton on this question, and he's right on target. But beyond that, let me say this. As one who was part of a very intricate and almost complete security network, what I know happened after Bonham's demise, and from all the things we've heard and seen, this government lacked the competence to monitor effectively those persons who are coming either as refugees or migrants. I'm not too sure which category to put them in across our borders. And we must not forget what has already been stated, I think, in today's or yesterday's Starbucks News. We don't wait for tomorrow to see what you ought to see. In parts of Europe, and that is what happened, where a majority of people of one grouping inhabit a particular part of your country, they then, with boldness and with arms, say, this is ours. So what the PP is doing is short-sighted and a part of a gimmick because they hope and they don't understand the psyche of the Venezuelans. Whether they're authentic immigrants or not, or refugees, I don't have the intelligence, but I know that speaking to some of the top brass in the PP, they lack the competence and personnel to deal with this issue. And I attended the function some weeks ago at Pegasus, hosted by the Chinese government, where they bid farewell to the doctors. And what is interesting, and I say this because people without experience don't notice these things. President Ali was in the country. I checked. But the two persons who represented, I nearly said, His Majesty's government, were the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I have no beef with the Prime Minister. But those of us who've been in public life and politics for generations, and I hope my friend Mark Phillips will forgive me, a good chief of staff writes interesting letters. But I told him so once. I don't know if he understood what I was saying. Neither he nor Todd are what we call political heavyweights. That's a fact. In every community, in every political party, you have heavyweights, middleweights, lightweights, and featherweights. He's a nice gentleman, very charming. But he ought to know he's come out of the military. And I don't think anybody in PP consider him a political heavyweight. And therefore, when he gets up at that function and turns to Chinese ambassador and says he expects the Chinese to support them in their struggle with Venezuela, out of courtesy, I did not burst out laughing. Unless he doesn't understand, I don't know who wrote the script for him. The complex international situation in which we live today. He wouldn't at a Chinese function get up and say that. The Chinese would have noticed that President Ali was in the treasury, but was not present.
Mhm.
That wasn't escape their attention. Say what you like about Chinese. They're keen, very, very keen people. And I say this to advise our friends in the PPP that they must be careful. 50 years ago, the world was treacherous but fairly simple. When I entered politics as a teenager in 1953, it was the East versus the West. It was the Cold War. And I remember as a youngster when at Fulton, Missouri, the mighty Englishman, Sir Winston Churchill, in the presence of the then President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, in February of 1946, delivered his speech at Fulton, Missouri, when he talked, and the word has gained currency in the dictionaries now, an iron curtain descending around the Balkans. That triggered a destructive Cold War. Burnham and Jagan had to navigate through that treacherous period. And that is why the Constitution was suspended in 1953. Burnham had the sagacity to know what to say and when to say it.
Mhm. Mhm.
The point I wish to make, and if those honorable gentlemen care to listen to the old tiger, today's world is even more complex. You have India interested in Guyana, China, Russia, the United States, and the mother country. Unless you have the political sagacity, guile, and perspicacity to understand the world as it is today, you wouldn't run around this country as the president is doing, making all sorts of statements when he's not doing what he ought to do. Calling Aubrey Norton, whether they're going to shake hands or not is not material. I will speak to Aubrey and say, shake hands, nothing wrong with shake hands. But his duty under the Constitution is to call in the leader of the opposition and say, look, we have a problem with oil and gas. We want you as representing a substantial portion of this population to discuss this matter if it takes 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. So we come out with a program that we take to these all giants, because those all giants understand that if Norton Ali speaks to them, they're speaking, and Ramjatan, they're speaking to 99% of the population. And we get much, much, much more than we're getting at the moment. But if Ali and his boss, I say so without being facetious, because in the structure of the People's Progressive Party, the General Secretary is the Alpha and the Omega. That has been the party structure. They don't have a leader.
They don't have a leader.
And Bara Jagdeo is the General Secretary, and therefore the Kingmaker. They should get together if they have the interests of this country at heart and speak with the opposition and then go to the all giants with a simple, straightforward program. And don't let me hear what I heard Mr. Ali blurting out that what will sophisticated investors feel if we talk. But what they adumbrated when they were in the opposition, renegotiation. So they're speaking with a double set of tongues. But I pause by reminding listeners that we are a blessed country. We have oil, gas, gold in abundance. When I visited the Northwest some years ago, ordinary people were using a pickaxe to get gold from the old railway that connected Matthews Ridge to Port Kaituma. I know the area. Burnham sent me in there to persuade the workers to convert from mining to being farmers, but that was an impossible task.
Okay.
And we must remember, and here again, that when the manganese company closed down, I was present when they told the magnificent Forbes Burnham they're closing shop because they discovered, in their words, they were mining in an inverted cone. That meant as they went deeper, there was less manganese. Today, a company is there harvesting the manganese, and we're told they're getting gold. I haven't been there, I have no evidence. But sometimes what you hear through the grapevine, you must believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that you have companies operating in this country that declaring small sums of our non-renewable mineral resources. And you have a government shouting from the mountaintops, what will you say to sophisticated investors? Chris, let me say something on that. I have not considered my political friends on this one. But what we see in Guyana today, there's no need to bring any more investors. You have all those oil blocks. We have gold, manganese. At Itring Band, our Guyanese are not given the opportunity to harvest the gold that is there. God gave us that gold. So when Ali talks about what will he say to sophisticated, his words, not mine, developers. Left to me, I will say, look, let's pause, get what we can out of the present crop of developers, and move to the next stage. We don't want any more developers coming in because, forgive me, you've heard the Guyana Revenue Authority stating that they lack the human resources to monitor the figures given to them by these various oil companies. So you're bringing in more people. You don't have the capacity. So when they tell you it's how much, 214 million US, and somebody reduce it to 3 million, and they're going to throw somebody under the bus, what is the point? We're not a million people in this country. With that, those oil blocks now available, and that gold in Northwest, Etring Bang, North Pacaramas, and all over the place. We have enough natural resources and our timber to make every person in this country happy and comfortable. The last information we have is if we got what we ought to out of these developers, every Guyanese family, and I repeat, every Guyanese family should have at least $4 to $5 million annually for them to spend. But I pause for you to ask questions because old men like to talk. And I hope I have not talked too much. But I have so much to say. With my 70-odd years in the hustings that I can only speak on. I don't have a script because I can't read these days. If I had a script, I'd talk much longer.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Well, Comrade Green, like I said earlier, it's always good when we can have our elders to come on forums like these to educate our folks. But I just want to, before we go further into the conversation, I want to say good night to Bertie Sukraj and to remind him that when you come on this program, you're in school. If you don't want to learn, then you can go and be a child left behind. The other persons, 500 plus persons who are here at this time, they are ready and willing to learn. So you can go that side with your foolishness. And Comrade Green, while we're on Bertie Sukraj, which I don't think Bertie Sukraj is his real name. Bertie Sukraj is here talking about Hamilton Green should be the last person to talk about development because there was a time when Burnham starved people and we had food shortages. It's what you barely tapped on that. But you see, quite a lot of them don't understand. And they're so gullible that they will just grab at whatever Jagneo and the others say to them. But I'd be happy if you can shed some light on that.
Whoever Sukraj is, he's like the typical monkey, regurgitating the propaganda he's heard from certain quarters. Nobody starved in those days. There were difficulties because of the oil crisis. And that is why perhaps this government is unwilling to join OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And they know why. Because the bosses tell them not to join OPEC. During Burnham's era, we sought to feed, clothe, and house the nation. And I can give many examples of success. We were fighting against a People's Progressive Party entrenched, determined that Burnham's FCH program should not succeed. I've heard one nincompoop, and I wouldn't call his name, I respect my breath, who criticized Burnham for being on horseback and going through rural and urban areas distributing planting material. The idea was to encourage people to plant on their lands that they were not using. The oil crisis moved us to a point where we were getting X dollars per ton for sugar. And when the oil crisis came and had to buy oil, we were paying about 5 times more for that oil than the sugar we were getting. And I remember one year when we got a good deal with a Middle East country to supply them with sugar. Up came the PP, called the strike, so we couldn't produce the sugar. Many of us had to go, including myself, go in the estates to cut cane. I'll tell you something. I respected every cane cut after that. It wasn't easy work.
I know.
But the point is that nobody starved. And in fact, we learned to appreciate and use our local fruits.
Exactly so.
I have told this story umpteen times. My daughters are alive to certify what I'm about to say. In our house, we only use local fruits. So when an uncle died in New York, my first wife, I took the girls to the old aunt. She brought a basket with apples, grapes, and all the foreign fruits. My daughter, who is now a scientist in Texas, bit an apple and asked Auntie, "Do you have a sapodillo?" I mentioned that because growing up as a youngster in Charleston or Boyston, it was unthinkable in the colonial days and before Burnham introduced produce or perish that the poorest person in our Boyston, Charleston would go to bed on Christmas Eve night without what we call an ice apple. But my daughters, not having that in the house, got people to smuggle it in,
Yes.
understood that the sapodilla was a superior fruit and that the Buxton spice mango
Yes.
was more nutritious and better than any foreign fruit we can think about. I've told the story 1,000 times and reminded my daughters of that experience. So things don't happen overnight. And if I can say anything adverse of Burnham, he was a brilliant man. But he lacked the patience for ordinary people to catch up with his ideas. And that was his weakness.
Okay.
Brilliant man, a great visionary. But he didn't have the patience for many of us to catch up with his brilliance and his ideas. We started to tell people to use cassava bread. And the political opposition talked about wheat and flour. We reminded them that when they talked about punishing the Indo-Guyanese community, there are parts of India where they don't know and don't use wheat and flour. And even though wheat and flour has come back, what is special about that when you can produce your own flour? And Burnham started a program with certain people, but didn't, after he died, all those things went by the wayside, unfortunately. That we, and I think this time is still right, even now we found oil to persuade our farmers to do much more than they're doing at the moment. I was in the market 2 days ago and was appalled when a vendor told me the pawpaw I wanted to purchase was an imported one.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Wow.
that couldn't happen if Bono were alive.
Jeez.
So those dishonorable gentlemen who talked about starvation, let me say something. I'll be 89 next month. And except for my vision problem, in pretty good shape. My wife is young and she can attest. We grew up at a time when we didn't have all this imported stuff. But beyond Bonham era, people forget that during World War II between 1939 and 1945, because of the war, you couldn't import foreign foods, and we survived. And as I told one of my staff yesterday, they admitted we are stronger than they are because we ate local foods.
Local foods, yes.
And I use those examples not to get away from the fact that things were rough, but that it served a good purpose. I am in pretty good shape. Those of my age group, I spoke to a friend who went to school with me, because we grew up on local food, cassava bread and those things. And it's only when the war ended that we reintroduced all these alien canned foods and things. So that whoever that gentleman is, he has history upside down and is part of a cabal to blame Bonham for everything that went wrong, ignoring the situation of the world as it was then and as it can likely be with the situation in Israel and Ukraine.
You know, Comrade Green, like some of our viewers are saying, that young man or the two young men, they were, I think it might have been three of them, they prefer to be mentally continued. They prefer to continue to be mentally lazy. That's one. And
Lazy, forgive me, retarded.
and
Our language should be more precise.
should be more precise, but I take that one. And secondly, it is amazing that they're saying that Guyanese were starving. But just the other day, I think it might have been about a month ago, a Caribbean leader was reminding that Guyana was the breadbasket of the Caribbean. So I don't understand how is it that we can feed our other brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, and we were considered the basket of the food basket of the Caribbean, and we here our people are starving. It doesn't match. You know, it's like what Nigel Dharamlal said a couple of mornings ago. The PNC, the people in the PNC can't add, and the people in the APNU can't add. But it's the same people in the APNU, the same attorney from the APNU AFC that he was cussing out all the time. He had to contract that same attorney, the same attorney who he said couldn't count, you know.
Where is this from?
Well, it's the attorney who went there to represent him. The very same attorney, whether it was his firm or the attorney himself, who represented him, who ensured that he got $1 million bail. So I don't understand if you can't count how you know $1 million. But it's just upside down with these people when they want to carry one trend of thinking. And we know why they do that. It's a form of race, holding on to one particular race and to keep them in control. But we're not going to allow Bertie Sukraj to bother us tonight because we've got better things to talk about. Bertie Sukraj should be telling his folks how to control the influx of Venezuelans that we are having in this country. And you see, they don't understand that these Venezuelans who are coming into this country, nobody is screening them. Nobody is finding out why these people are circling our country, because in every single administrative region you visit, Venezuelans are there in their numbers. Why are they circling our country? Mr. Bertie Sokrat should be asking Mr. Robeson Ben, what is happening here? Just the other day, we saw a whole set of them coming in by day 4, sure, it's somewhere in region 3 there.
Off Tushen.
Off of Tushen, you know?
But what is interesting about that, I spoke to a fairly senior functionary of the government, and I was told that they took them in, they screened them. So I asked, what is the means of the screening? He couldn't give me a lucid answer. But what is clear, they're using these Venezuelans as a tool for the mischief. They assume, and they don't know the Venezuelan psyche and culture, that those Venezuelans, because of their looks, would vote for the PP on the next round because they've already gone to Parliament with provisions to make it easy for them to get passports and therefore to be registered as citizens. What I think is sad about this government, they don't know history. And I will give this example, which I believe I put in the letter the other day. My mother, who was a rabid Bornomite, her sister lived in Maracaibo and got married to a Venezuelan gentleman. The eldest son, Roland Racker is his name, came to this country. I must have been in primary school, 10, 11 years old. And I remember him saying to my mother, and that nearly caused World War III, that they understood that Essequibo belonged to them. And this is what this government must understand. Every Venezuelan child, I'm telling you, about 56 years ago, I was a youngster. My first cousin told my mother that why it is we don't give back Essequibo to Venezuela, because that's we're taught in school. So all those migrants who coming,
Yes.
their belief, the ideology, the philosophy is that Essequibo belongs to them. So if you have a large enough number settling in any part of Northwest, don't be surprised that the Venezuelans will supply the appropriate arms and they say, this is mine. It will not be out of malice because they really believe.
They believe, yes.
All the exercise, and my cousin Roland told us that. All the exercise books. I remember Spanish. My wife, who speaks Spanish, will tell you, has something to be reclaimed. So, irrespective of whether it's Maduro or Chavez, the Venezuelan child, and therefore adult today, deep down believes that Essequibo belongs to them. So you have this idiotic process of treating these Venezuelans who come here with special treatment. And even though the legislation is there, Haitians don't get the same treatment.
They don't.
And one should ask the question, why? But I just say to any PP top brass who may be listening to this program, what they're doing can easily be a boomerang to turn around and hit them between the eyes. Because, and let me on a lighter note say this, insecurity, as we heard in Europe, in Asia and Latin America, and with due respect to you, madam, the ladies are used as the front line, you know.
That's true.
Any government would do that and has done so. I've been to certain countries, and unless it had not been for my natural tendency not to hunt outside of my forest, they provide opportunities for you, both the socialist and the non-socialist countries, so that the people better understand they're playing with fire, literally and metaphorically, and that they can't monitor those people who come as refugees. Where's the money coming from? How did that boat get as far as Tushan?
As Toshan, exactly so.
And why weren't they incarcerated as they do with the Haitians? But one gentleman told me that the Venezuelan ladies are very attractive. Since I don't see well, and the only attractive person for me is my wife, therefore it wouldn't affect me. But those fellas like, I don't want to call his name.
The boy, dirty man.
Your boy,
Dirty man.
yeah, will easily be caught in the net. I don't forget to tell you. Well, I better don't tell you the story. I tell you off the program. of the Guyanese gentleman who was found dead in the presence of a certain lady, Venezuelan, and what she told the police. But I'll tell you off the program.
Of the program. All right. Good. But while of course we have fun, this program is where we do have fun. And outside of having the little bit of humor is where we're educated, But Comrade Green, while I hear you talk about what we went through and the little hardship we faced, but it was all positioning us to become self-sufficient. And if we had followed through with the vision and the ideologies of Lyndon Forbes, Sampson, Burnham, we would not have had people like Irfan Ali and them telling us now, go and plant a seed and produce or perish. Now, all they are doing now is reusing the words that LFS Burnham used, and they might drop off a word that says produce and put something else, but it all means the same thing, and they're encouraging persons to plant in their yard, plant up the land, don't leave the land. But these are all things that I remember as a little girl. I heard my father and my aunts and so on talking about. You get Burnham used to give you packets with okra seeds and packets with black eye seeds and pigeon peas and so on, and tell you, plant up the space in your yard, plant in front of your yard, don't bother with all these flower plants and so on. Plant things that, put down plants there that you can get produce from to eat, and so it's nothing strange that is happening, that they are bringing everything they're bringing back again. But like everything else, they dress them up in a different clothing. And I want to say to our viewers, if we had followed the pathway that was led to us by LFS Burnham, we would have been a country like Cuba, the US, and so many others. Because for some of you who don't know, I want to say to you that in our hinterland, in Lethem and those places, is where we started canning cashew nuts and pineapple and mangoes and all of that, right there. And we were exporting those. So I don't understand how, Guyanese people were starving and we were doing all these kinds of things. But we'll touch a little more on that because we have some other issues to touch on. Comrade Green, I know you served as Minister of Health, Minister of Youth Sports, Youth and Sports, or Youth Sports and Culture. You also shadowed a little bit of education and so on.
No, no, no.
You didn't go on that part. All right.
That first one.
Your first, yes, sorry. I just had her on the screen there. But the thing is, our education system today, our education sector today, it leaves so much to be desired. I remember just a couple of years ago, 2015 to 2020, we saw a mixture of staffing in our ministries, in our departments of education. But when you go into some of our departments of education now, you wonder whether, you know, we're seeing, I remember, yes, there were times when we used head teachers because of their skills, and we used them in a certain area, but they were still heading their schools or manning their schools, and we had some senior teachers. But now we're having teachers we already short of teachers, but we're dragging teachers out of schools, and we're seconding them to the departments of education. Now, in your if you were there, what would you have done? Would you have pulled the system that is already, the sector that is already depleted, and make them now well, they're not officers, but they're performing duties as education officers?
Absolutely not. It's because somewhere in the system, they lack an appreciation of the importance of what education is all about.
It's all about. I would say so.
Education is intended to provide our young people with knowledge, to keep abreast of emerging technology and science, and prepare them for a very fast-moving world of technology. To do that, you need to upgrade all of your teachers. I say all of your teachers. B, ensure that your teachers are appropriately remunerated, and to recognize that unlike maybe 56 years ago, the teacher is an important component for development, because those teachers spend what, 4 or 5 hours per day with their children, particularly children who have, as is the majority of in the urban areas, come out of broken homes. The teachers have a massive task, an undertaking to guide those children, to give them a moral compass for one thing, and to give them an opportunity to understand the importance of education in its wider sense. And that is why I was glad to hear from you and others that at the next foray, the union would press the government to ensure that every school has some musical instrument, some cultural program, some fixed sporting program, so that you don't produce beasts who just want to get 15, 20 subjects. You produce human beings who can cultivate an understanding that they're part of the development and that they're part of a new world, of which Guyana is a vital part, particularly now that we have all this oil, gas, gold, and minerals. And to remind our teachers that as they pass on knowledge to our young people, that all of those materials that we have are non-renewable. And the late Eric Williams reminded them, oil don't spoil. And what is the anxiety to pull out all the oil now?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something that bothered me. I almost came to tears when I heard Vice President Jagdeo say something which I couldn't believe my ears, that we need to ensure that we go for fossil fuel. Because in his own words, as I said, I couldn't believe my ears, that solar energy is unreliable. Out of respect for his office, I wouldn't use the words to describe that statement. But all over the world, people are going for solar energy and wind power. And to say that solar energy is unreliable because you have so many hours of sunshine is absolute nonsense, unfit for a schoolboy, and not a bright schoolboy either. Because a solar building is equipped with batteries that even when the rain is falling and you have sunshine coming through, is being recharged. And we already have in this country, I think yes, Supercell put up a solar building in Camp Street. So to hear our illustrious vice president say that is not an option because he wants to promote Amelia Falls, I don't know. It's unbelievable. We have in this country sunshine almost every day, even during rainfall.
Yes.
And the new solar panels capture the sunshine even when rain is falling. So that I don't understand what he said. I hope for the sake of our young people, he would correct that statement, which I heard on, of all stations, Kaicho Radio the other night. Unbelievable.
But Comrade Green, sometimes you don't need to take seriously anything coming from the vice president, because the vice president would say so many things, and those can be proven not to be true. As a matter of fact, I really don't need to get there, but I have to. When a man could stand up and tell this entire nation that he's married to a woman legally, and it was not so, then you can understand the length that that person would go to deceive this nation. The vice president, when he was in opposition, he spoke about how bad the contract was and how bad it was and what they will do, and they're going to renegotiate and all kind of thing. And now the man saying a totally different story. I remember when...
Correct me if you're wrong. He's not saying it. You know, years ago, there was the first telegram phone records made.
Yes.
You know the story? Where the man was makes it in another room, and this speaker, his dog, I think his name was Miti, was listening to this song, and that's how you got the gramophone records called His Master's Voice.
His master's voice.
I say nothing more.
Those who have ears to hear, you're going to hear. And if you could decipher, like old people would say, you could decipher, then decipher. But, Comrade Green, on a serious note, this vice president that we have here, he seems to be the president, because you hear him making all these statements. And even sometimes when the installed president would go out there and make a statement, the vice president would come and undo that. And we have seen this kind of action. It looks as if it's a culture in the PPP. Because don't forget, when Jagdeo became president, and we must remind this nation that Jagdeo was not elected president when he became president then. Sam Hines was pushed down, and Janet was pushed in, and Janet stepped down, and Jagdeo came in. So Jaguar was never really elected president when he became president of this country. But then when he became president, he made some statements. Janet Jagan made some statements, and Jaguar reminded her that you have no right to say anything. You're an ordinary citizen. Don't say anything to me. And so we saw the same thing with our friend and Donald Ramatar. Donald came out there and he spoke about this whole issue with the audit and all of that. And then Irfan came out and tell him, you had your time, why you didn't do it? And we can go further on that, where we saw Priya Manik Chand going to the ambassador's house to tell the man what he should do, you know? So it's a trend in the PPP where they don't regard their elders. They are always very disrespectful, and they feel that they can spread that disrespect all across this land. Hence the reason for them doing the things that they do and for saying to people what they feel like saying to the citizens of this country. But we must remind them that it is the votes of the citizens that they need when it's elections time. Just the same way it is alleged that they spent $9 billion for the local government elections. And I'm sure that they have much more than that to spend coming on to general and regional elections. But let's talk a little more about we've seen the collapse of the education sector. Just the other day, we had the Madia fire. 20 innocent lives were lost, even though we had reports indicating that this dorm is not safe. You should pull those grills down. You should have labels for exit and have exit, and you should have entrances and exits, and they should be well labeled. That did not happen. 20 lives were lost. Others are marred for life. But we still have an education minister who flouts herself all around the place. And I think just the other day, she had there a post somewhere. In 5 years, the APNU AFC government could not build a secondary school. I mean, she don't remember the things that the PNC did, that they inherited, all the secondary schools. As a matter of fact, she shouldn't even be saying that, because she should remember it was under the PNC that she got free education, but now we have to pay for it under the PPP. We got to pay for it.
Well, we have a serious cultural problem. And for me, we should spend our time and energy trying to inform our young people of the flaws and what they should be doing to organize themselves. I've always said what we need to do on a program like this is to get our young people to get together to say you've got to organize yourselves. I've given examples of that umpteen times. Our young people have been cast aside, lost away, and we are to blame sometimes for 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get hold of them, the 20 years old, the teenagers who are now coming to school, and let them know the dangers that lie ahead and that they must get involved. And this involvement must go cut across race, gender, and religion, so that our young people must know how they are now endangered by a cabal that don't understand education. Look, you're putting up schools all over the place, but is there a solid structured program to train your teachers? So what, you're going to bring teachers from outside? Or, as we see happen in the health sector, the idea is to promote their friends in the private sector to make more money, running counter to what Jagan felt when he talked about a social society and what burned himself to make the small man a real man. And they put up a sign calling Jagan the father of the nation while going counter to the things he believed in and the things he talked about. And that is the tragedy what we have to sell a bill to our young people that they must rise up. Too many of our young people have taken a position, well, what happened will happen. I can try and get a visa to Barbados or to London or to the United Kingdom or the United States, forgetting that in the United Kingdom now you have another problem where you heard the Prime Minister say he's not interested in reparation because you know who he is.
Mhm.
Um, if you know the history of West Africa, where he grew up, you would understand the challenge we face.
Mhm.
And this is a serious matter. And I hope to get together some young people in secondary schools to let them understand what education is all about. It's not about 3 hours alone. It's about preparing them for the next journey of life, particularly in a very complex world in which we live. A world that beckons greatness for this country, but not with a group who's using money and the media to their advantage. I wouldn't even bother to talk about my good friend, um, because it's about sanctity of contract. You made a point, there's nothing more sanctimonious than the oath you take for better or for worse until death do us part. That is a solemn promise.
Mhm.
But yet you go up the steps of the Supreme Court, you see all these divorce cases. So there's a certain inconsistency or not, or perhaps dishonesty when they talk about the sanctity of contract. All over the world, when conditions change, you say to the other man, look, the price of oil is double what it was when I signed this contract. Let's talk again. Whether you call it renegotiation or a discussion, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The word is unimportant. But we need to talk. And I earlier said the only way they can speak to those giants is if they speak on behalf of the majority of people in this country and not 50%.
But you know, they, like we've been saying, they're not interested in speaking on behalf of the majority of the people in this country. They are only interested in speaking for themselves. And if you look around this country, then you'll see only a few persons who are benefiting from almost everything that is happening in this country. You see persons having one man or one construction company having five contracts, another one, five contracts. And when you look at these persons, when you do your groundwork, you recognize that this one is related to a minister, might be a minister's nephew, a minister's son, minister brother, minister father-in-law. And so it's just a little grouping of persons who are benefiting from the proceeds and all the oil money and everything else that is
Well,
happening.
look at what's happening in London right now. The man whose house is on the edge of the road they're building by Wismore. The man protested. The residents came out to support him. And I spoke to two groups today, and they're building a road. There's no, and late people don't build a road, must have a drainage.
Yes.
There's no drainage program. But when I probe further, the contractor who brought in his own workers are all alien to Linden, if you know what I mean.
I understand that, and I'm sure that our viewers understand what you mean.
And that's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate that we often talk about if you're going to do a project in an area, let's say you're doing a project in Alboystown, then the residents from Alboystown must benefit the most in terms of job creation. Yes, when we look at what happened there with the Bolivar, you saw them a new road. But when we look at the cross streets, ain't nothing new. Same old, same old. And many of the folks there did not benefit from the major aspect of the work. They got cleaning gutter contracts.
But a rule I left since 1992 when we left office is once you're doing these roads, the community ought to be consulted in advance so A, they know what's happening, and B, are involved and will help the ministry to monitor the work being done by the contractor, because the contractors aren't saints. They want to maximize the profits, apart from what you said. But it is unfortunate because what we see happening today, the billions they have are being used to enrich a cabal. The last time I was in Miami, I saw a three-story building near to where my cousin lives. And I saw a Guyana flag flying. So I said, what is this? When I inquired, it was a supporter of the PVP who had got a big contract, had a big three-story bungalow there with Guyana flag flying in Florida. And that has been the pattern. So that we've got to put a stop to it. We're not going to put a stop unless our young people understand what is happening to them. And let me add this caveat. What you're hearing from the powers that be is similar to what you heard from Ian Smith in Rhodesia and Vorster in South Africa, who argued, look, don't tell me about what's happening in South Africa with apartheid. Our average black South African is better off than the other people in other parts of Africa. True. But that comparison is odious because you're not removing the fact that the wealth of the money is going to a particular group in South Africa and Rhodesia. That's why Ian Smith declared UDI on the 10th of November 1965. He didn't want any truck with a British who by then were being pushed to have one man, one vote. So he declared UDI. And I remember we had just arrived in London at West Lancaster House for the Final Independence Conference. And Burnham turned to the Secretary of State and said, when will you send troops to suppress this insurrection in Rhodesia? And the British man said, oh, Mr. Burnham, you're a naughty chap. Different strokes for different folks.
Different folks, yes. But Comrade Green, we keep hearing this talk of one Guyana. And I'm happy that our viewers are so into this conversation because they're echoing some of the sentiments that we've been echoing. And I see one of our viewer here, Ben Linton, talking about, oh, beautiful Guyana, my lovely native land. And then I saw another one which spoke about our national motto, one people, one nation, one destiny. And like you said earlier, we've got to get our young people more involved and educate them so they understand the $10,000, that can't cater for 5 years of your life. The $20,000 on a t-shirt, it can't do you anything. A box of cook-up, it gonna spoil if you don't put it up. So we have to educate our young people and get them to understand that these little tokens that are being thrown at you is not even a tip of the iceberg of what is being stolen by the others. And we often refer to what is thrown out there as crumbs. While you are receiving 10 cents, they're gone with 250 cents, and just, I notice our time is running down on us, but to put all of this into a capsule, we just saw the Commissioner General of GRA issuing a statement regarding this whole business of this 214 million US dollars that we heard a public servant reduced to 3 million US dollars. Well, you know that, of course, that poor public servant, he is being made the scapegoat. But we here should be clamoring, and our people should be clamoring for the head of the Minister of Natural Resources and the Vice President.
Well, in any other country, they will be asked to tender resignation because the buck stops there.
Exactly. So, as a matter of fact, Comrade Green, if you remember, we were in Parliament when we were fighting against this same order where they wanted the minister to be the sole authority. We argued against that, and now this very minister is coming to tell us that he wasn't aware, and he thought that GRA was the person who said this figure, and all kinds of unaware and not being aware. Then he should go home.
Or send him to work in a hardware store.
Well, you know, because he's not aware, so I figure he can't count. But poor Bobby Gosai is the man who's caught in the middle of this thing. And yesterday I heard Exxon saying they are sorry for Bobby Gosai, and he was very efficient in his dealings with them, and they are so sorry that he has now found himself in the middle of this whole thing here.
But I understand that Rodriguez, or whatever his name is claiming that the 5 persons are not accurate in their recollection of what he told them. There's Norton, David Patterson, and the well, you know, I don't know.
Well, I know it's all kind of stories passing, but I'm happy. I'm not sure if you saw this statement coming out from Mr. Cde about this for 214 million US dollars, and he said that, you know, that is the amount.
But that is the tip of the iceberg.
Well, we know that. We know that aspect of it too. But again, you know, criminal elements in the PPP, including Barra Jagbio, wants Godfrey Station, head of the Guyana Revenue Authority, fired for demanding that ExxonMobil pay its 240 million US to the Guyanese people.
That's the latest?
This is what we are seeing here on Guyana Truth and Facts.
I can't believe that.
Yes, and because Stacia came out with a statement saying GRA is the authority on this, and we are saying that this is what is owed, this is what they must, this is what the audit report has shown.
He wants Stacia fired?
So I noticed they're saying now that they want Stacia fired. I don't know how true that is.
That could be true.
But the thing is, I figure they expected Godfrey Stacia to come out and make some statement in support of them. But a professional is a professional. And even if you have to be fired for being a professional, then so be it. But the PPP government, they are so, the culture of the PPP viewers is to always be in corrupt activity. They're always trying to cipher off something for themselves. They're always lying to this nation. They're always trying to cover up what is not truth. You know, and so we have to expose them at every opportunity. It's like I noticed, I saw the opposition leader, Comrade Norton. He was in Region 5, where the PPP they're now disturbing the dead to use the land to do something else. They're uprooting graves and all kinds of things, and the people in Region 5 had to be protesting. I mean, these people have no respect whatsoever for anybody. Dead or alive.
In Region 5, there's a hospital at Fort Wellington that's been there for years, but they take it to, I think, Bath or somewhere else.
Yes. And you know,
there's no program to train nurses.
None whatsoever. The same thing with education.
Of course.
They have issues with the lecturers we're having at the Stillwater College of Education, the institute that is used to train teachers. Because you're paying them $1,000 and $1,200 an hour. Now you don't have enough lecturers to train to teach those young teachers, but you both think that you're training 2,000 and 4,000. But when they come out of college, what you having there coming out? Huh? No wonder we're having problems in the education sector, because the amount of work that they're supposed to cover, they can't cover it. So you have half-baked teachers coming into the classrooms. And the PPP, they're proud of it. Priya Manikchand is proud about that. And they don't see the need for quality. They see the need for quantity. Just to boast, to say, we have done this and we have done that. It's like what they did in many, many of our schools. The same schools that they're declaring open, and they're talking about the PNC didn't do that and APNU didn't do this. But what's the use building all these huge buildings when you're not tiling the floor for the nursery in the nursery schools, when you're not painting the classrooms properly, when you have wide open spaces? What is the sense of doing that? But we know that that's the way they're able to siphon off the taxpayers' monies and all these monies that they get from all these debt that they go and create, that we, our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren will have to repay at some point. But, it's amazing. I've seen when the coalition got into office, the amount of mess that they had to clear up from some of those same secondary schools that you had to do so much work in. And I want to remind Priya that while you're claiming that no secondary school was built under the coalition, I want to remind you, so you can remind your viewers and your followers, and I want to educate our viewers here, that the secondary schools that Priya is now declaring, all of those monies were passed to build those schools under the coalition. The plan and everything was in place. I also want to remind Priya that under the coalition and under the PNC, when the PNC were government, we hadn't 20 lives that were lost. But during your term as Minister of Education, you should go home too. During your term as minister, or your stint as minister before, we had lives lost in Upper Maz. And again here now in Region 8 in Madia, more lives were lost. So the cries of those parents and the other families are on you, Priya, and on your government.
But let me say something about Madia. Madia is a place I had a special affection for years ago. Our main activist there was a man called Cyril Francis. Let's call him Gasso. I think his daughter's the PP member of parliament now, Edwards. And I remember going into Madia and going through the areas, lovely streams of water. I remember distinctly in the 60s, 70s, stopping to cup water to drink it from the streams going into Madia.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there some years ago, I wouldn't even put my boots in the streams. Murky, full of I don't know what. But even crocodiles couldn't live there now. And this government has allowed that debauchery to take place by the same people who claim to be champions of the earth.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know who they're fooling.
Champions of destruction. As a matter of fact, I would want to refer to what one of my colleagues call him, the Doctor of Doom. Doctor of Doom, everything. And if we check, it is there to show everything that Barajagdio put his hand on, it failed.
Well,
don't talk about the Skeldon Sugar Factory.
A certain friend of mine who's been in politics since the 50s referred to the two top fellas as the major wreckers.
They wrecking homes, they wrecking families, they wrecking even the country, they wrecking everything, they wrecking. But Comrade Green, the last one we're going to touch on before we go is that of GPL. I know quite a lot of our viewers, they're saying GPL, and quite a lot of our citizens are saying GPL. Every day is power outage 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes you have it for long hours.
Well, you've heard what I call the facile explanation by the government side. Thank God David Patterson gave a very lucid response, which I think you should put on your program in Prissy, that they had in place a program, but the PP, as usual, came in, changed things around,
Like they
and
always do.
now they're doing the absurd thing of asking their friends in the private sector to use their generators between, I think, 5 and 9 at night. The upshot of that, of course, is that yes, they learned that the price of certain items have already gone up, including water.
Yes.
I buy water by the 5-gallon containers. That has gone up. So at the end of the day, all this shenanigans and sand dancing, the ordinary worker is the victim
Yep.
because we've had nothing structured from this government with all these millions and billions to deal with the cost of living. And any administration driven by any intellectual's good sense will be able to tackle what is affecting the ordinary people, the cost of living. And I want to end. All they have to do is put in place what the Master Blaster did. Free education, they have the money now,
Yes.
from kindergarten to university. Training our teachers, in particular, our nurses. I met a nurse at the post office last week. I have not been able to check, but maybe you can check. That they get a loss of $20,000 a month. I can't believe her. Check it for me if it's true. How could you give a nurse training $20,000 a month? That
When-
alone is transportation.
When we have so much.
I don't believe it is true.
Well, I would want to say to you, you better believe it, because the little that the nurses at the Liliendal infectious hospital, the little allowance that they have been getting there, they have reduced it. They have reduced it. Frank Anthony and others, they've reduced it.
I mean, reduce
So,
it, but
let's say they were getting, let's say $25,000. They're cutting that in half.
I don't believe you.
Well, I'm telling you, it's actually true. It's true, because the nurses there have been complaining. As a matter of fact, quite a few of them have left. Because, we have learned in industrial relations and in trade unionism that gains you have made, you don't ever reduce that. You always aim to get higher. But the gains that the nurses have made under the coalition, they're reducing it.
Well, that's unfortunate. All I can say as we wind down, if this government is interested in the people, they've got to concentrate on human infrastructure, and not bridges, buildings, and as we see, anything. Because caucus, there's a long history of caucus in this country, Stanley Town, and people forget, But I don't forget, thank God, my memory is in good shape. The Del Conte project was to build a road from Purico going south opposite of Bartico. Millions of dollars were spent. Not 1 foot of road was built. On the PPP in 1960, Del Conte Road.
Well,
We need to remind the young people about those things.
That reminds us of the fiber optic cable. You remember that? You remember that cable there, the long cable that Barrett was rolling out on the seawall there? We never hear anything else about it, and billions of dollars.
The one was it one person laptop
One family,
program.
one laptop per family.
All that was money for their friends.
Yes. And they go and bring in 4th and 5th hand computers, and after 2 weeks, they're not working anymore.
And what I find amusing, if not tragic, is that the poor Minister of Works, Reverend Bishop Wanyaja, every now and then when he sees bad works being done, talks about people paying back. I would like you at the next press conference to ask him which contractor has been punished under their watch.
Blacklisted.
Or, well, the blacklisted will come back to get more contracts.
Okay.
Because he may mean well, but he is not the final arbiter. So all these contracts for bridges, sluices, roads are being done very badly. Look what's happening on East Bank.
Yes.
So that the emphasis is to share the wealth to the cabal and devil take the hindmost.
Yes. And you were just talking about the $28,000 that they trade the nurses in training are
I
receiving.
can't believe
And
that.
we got 10 days workers who receiving $40,000 per month. And it's only a certain section we see in these 10 days workers. But that's another story we'll talk about.
Must check, because the girl told me, I haven't had a chance to check, if that could be true. $28,000 a month for training nurse? Oh no. Must check it, because I like to write about it.
I'll check that and so that we can get the information. But Comrade Green, I want to thank you so much for being here
My
with
pleasure,
us.
anytime.
And I want you to know that we're going to pull you out again for 2 or 3 more segments of this discussion, because we couldn't talk a whole lot about what we wanted to talk about tonight. But viewers, I want to remind you about these Venezuelans who are coming into this country. I don't know whether we should term them migrants or we should term them refugees, because I know they have 2 different meanings. And I know this regime, these sanctimonious gangsters, they would want to call them migrants, because if you call them migrants, then you can use them to vote. But if you call them refugees, then there's a period within which they should return to their homeland, and they would not be able to vote. And so these sanctimonious gangsters, we have to watch them, because the Venezuelans are the ones who they will use to put on the voters list. And that is why we have to keep clamoring for a clean voters list. And not only a clean voters list, but we have to examine the names when we see them on the voters list, and to ask, where were these people? How long these people have been here? And we have to go and look for them too. Check the addresses and look for them. But, when we're having a good conversation, our time would always catch up with us. But Comrade Green, again, let me thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
And the viewers, remember, the PPP are no good for Guyana. They've not been good since way back then, and they're not good now. As a matter of fact, they are now the sanctimonious gangsters. And we can put other letters behind them, doctors of doom and everything else. Doctors of breakup and all sorts of things we can put behind their names. They're no good for Guyana. From one scandal to the next scandal, to the next scandal. From one set of discrimination to the next set of discrimination. If you can hug the Venezuelans, why are you discriminating? And when we're not finished with that, then we had the Mahdia fire, and then we got the COI. I don't know what's the reason for the COI now, but they'll tell us when they're finished. We got the COI, where lots of friends are going to get millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. But that's another story. We'll talk about that. But I want to leave with this one here. We always like to show this one. Of course, we're going to show you. Please remember this young man, Ronald Waddell. He was killed by these, an organized killing by the sanctimonious gangsters. Ronald Waddell. If you remember that outspoken activist, he was killed a few years ago, and nobody was held for his murder. And so that just went, like so many other young men who were killed under the PPP.
Paper shorts?
Paper Shorts is the new one, and all the cameras weren't working. Cameras leading to the president and the prime minister's residence and so on. None of those cameras were working. Hence, we got a serious problem. That's the reason for us titling our program this evening, Guyana is in Crisis, because if the security of the president and the prime minister is not important, then what about, we're just ordinary citizens. And before we end, we must show this young man here. So thank you for watching. Be good, Guyanese people.
Okay, correct.
Just
No make them take advantage of you. Nah, 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 yeah. Young girl wanna school, yeah. No follow nobody. Cause that man where you call you sexy could be twice your daddy. Man, no time of like greater. Plus, your mama don't have it. Please, me, I beg you, no make them come mess up your body. And you dirty man, you dirty man. Leave the people beneath them alone. It's wrong. So leave the people beneath them alone. It's a disgrace, man. Ooh, you're just a waste man. A waste man.
Just a waste man, oh yeah.
Hey, mommy, if you listen to your daughter, when she tell her she no happy, you see the signs and turn a blind eye. Me, I beg you to stop it.